does the usual routine in the morning. She checks the attendance of her students, calls out each of their names, and waits for an affirmation of their presence. One particular student, though, was not paying any attention. She was in a corner, staring out the window like she was staring through an empty space.
Elizabeth James?
There was no answer.
Elizabeth?
She called out again. This time, everybody turned their heads to the girl that was still staring out the window.
Elizabeth!
She called out even louder. The girl then turned and faced her teacher. Worried, Mrs. Smith asked,
Is something bothering you, dear?
Elizabeth didn't answer her. She merely just turned her head and stared out the window again.
You can tell me anything.
I hate my mommy.
Shocked, the teacher asked,
Why?
It's because she spanked me.
She wouldn't have spanked you if you did nothing wrong.
I didn't do anything. I was just telling the truth.
What did you tell her?
I told her she was the worst mom in the world.
Why did you tell her that? What did your mom do that made you say so?
She didn't let me eat chocolates last night.
Well, Elizabeth, chocolates are not good to eat, especially at night. Your mother knows that. Therefore, she didn't let you eat one.
But if she loves me, she would have given me what I wanted.
Sweetheart, remember that not all things can be given to you.
Mrs. Smith reminded her student. Elizabeth simply stared at her.
Why don't we do this? You go back to your seat first and participate in class. Later, we'll go grab some ice cream and talk, alright?
Elizabeth was reluctant for a moment, but eventually she nodded her head and went back to her seat.
Morning passed by, and the teachers observed Elizabeth's unusual silence. They thought it was simply because the child was not in the mood or such, so they brushed off the thought of confronting her.
When lunchtime came, Miss Smith was seen by the door of the classroom waiting for Elizabeth. When the girl was ready, they went into the school canteen together.
After eating their meal, Mrs. Smith bought an ice cream for both of them. While eating, she began talking to her about her issues.
Elizabeth, dear, about what you said earlier this morning. I just want you to understand that what your mother did was what is good for you. She wouldn't have said no if it wasn't for a reason. Please don't make such a big deal out of it.
But Mrs. Smith, it was not the only time that she prevented me from doing something that I would want to do.
What do you mean?
Last week, I wanted to use her computer because mine broke. I wanted to play some of my favorite online games, but she wouldn't let me.
Why didn't she let you play? Did you ask her that when she was using her computer?
Yes, but she was just updating her Facebook or something, and I wanted to play. I kept on tugging at her arm so that she would let me use the computer, but instead, she spanked me. That one hurt a lot.
Oh, Elizabeth, it wasn't right that you disturbed her like that. You could have just told her that you would want to play after she's done using the computer. She would have let you use it if only you waited until she was done. Instead, she spanked you because you didn't have any manners.
She was just doing something that wasn't even important, and I was so bored that's why I disturbed her like that.
My dear, for you it may have been boring, but for her it was entirely a different feeling. She's a grown-up and you're just a kid. You have different interests now. You should know how to understand that. If you were in her position and she was in yours, and she did that to you, would you have done the same thing as your mother did?
Elizabeth looked at her, wide-eyed and stunned.
Do you get what I mean, my dear?
No, I still don't understand why she would hurt me because of those things.
Sometimes, when somebody spanks someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that she wants to literally hurt them. Most of the time, it is just because she wants to teach that somebody a lesson.
What do you mean by that, Mrs. Smith?
It means that you have to show respect to somebody who is much older than you. especially when he or she is your parent. I know your mother got hurt when you told her that she is the worst mom in the world. Any mother would be if it came from the child. Elizabeth, you have to promise me that you would say sorry to your mom. Tell her that you now understand why she prohibited you from doing all those things. Lastly, tell her that even if she is not the best mom in the world, you still love her just the way that she is.
I will, Mrs. Smith. I'm sorry if I was being so stubborn.
Elizabeth hugged and kissed her on the cheek as a sign of gratitude.
Classes continued in the afternoon, and Elizabeth was no longer in her sheltered state. She was already happy and mingling with her classmates and friends. When the time came for them to go home, Elizabeth bought a rose that was sold outside of her school. She wanted to give that to her mom when she said sorry. She then went into the school bus and rode home. Upon arriving in her house, she immediately looked for her mom inside her bedroom. She found her facing the computer and was busy doing something. Unnoticed, she hugged her mom from behind and said,
Mom, I'm sorry for what I did and what I told you last night. I was wrong and I know that now. I love you, Mom, and I promise that I will never do it again.
Surprised but overwhelmed, her mom hugged her back and said,
It's okay, sweetheart, and I'm very happy that you realize all those things. I love you too very much.
Elizabeth handed her the rose, and her mom planted a kiss on her cheek.
The end.